Welcome everyone. We're here for Obsidian Office Hours. For today, the topic that we'll be covering is around Obsidian Workspaces, and it's not as talked about as a feature because it's not technically as developed and I guess call it as popular as some of the other ones that Obsidian has come out with. But I think it's one of those things where a little goes a long way when it comes to this feature. So I just wanted to cover it so that people know about it, talk about how I try to think about it and how I'm trying to integrate it into my workflow because I do think there are some optimization it does that can take us quite a long way. So with that said, I say let's jump right in, shall we? Okay, so first things first. What is Obsidian Workspace? I think, as always, I think the appropriate thing is to bring up the docs. Let me just copy that and drag that in here. Whoops. Oh, that's interesting. I've never done that before. All right, weird. It did not let me copy that. Oh, because it literally copied the one thing. Ah, there you go. Okay. All right, so to get us started, let's go ahead and take a look at the docs basically. And so workspaces to I think the easiest way of thinking about it is it's a predefined way of setting up a certain notes that you might use when you're switching contexts. And that's really the way I'm thinking about it is context switching is the best way of using workspaces. And so essentially what you got to do is you have this opportunity to basically say, hey, when I'm working in this sort of mindset, this is the way I'd like to lay things out within the application. I see Jimena in the chat. Hello, hello. I see Dude Man. Yes, Obsidian office hours are back. So they will be weekly on Wednesdays. I've noticed when it comes to like content creation, I have a little bit of a I'll call it like a fascination with alliteration. I like to think of Wednesdays as writing Wednesdays. And so hence note taking, writing, weekly Wednesdays. So writing Wednesdays, ergo Obsidian office hours. And that's when I'll be trying to release the videos as well. Yeah, I'm glad that you're able to tune in as well. So excited to get this started back up. And then more importantly, one of the reasons I am doing the Obsidian office hours for those who are, if you weren't here at the last session, is because I am working on the Obsidian course. And this is a way for me to just be here, talk with you all as you all have questions. And more importantly, just keep myself a bit accountable as far as just keep generating the content and just exploring things. So I basically create space so I have time to work on the course. So with that said, let's continue on, shall we? So let me do, I guess, a recap because I think the editing wise will be a little bit tricky later. When it comes to workspaces, the way that I like to think about it is workspaces are about context switching within notes. So essentially for right here, we have the ability to open notes and I've talked about theories regarding how to keep like a clean workspace. But in reality, when we think about it, a lot of times when we're writing or taking notes, we have specific context in which we're thinking about things. And so let's do a practical example for myself. So when I was doing live streaming, a lot of times what I needed to do was find a way to actually plan out my schedule or more importantly see what the heck I've done before. And so what I used to have to be able to do is I used to be like, okay, so for example, if I want to do Build with Ben, okay, Build with Ben was a live stream series that I'd been doing, which BT dubs I probably will be bringing back in the near future. But the motto of this particular year is consistency over in like bursts of inspiration that oftentimes can lead to burnout. So we're going for that. So you can see here, like I have a bunch of stuff here. I have this table, which is really great. But on the other hand, that is like how many things I do a build with Ben series, right? Like I had to type quite a few characters to make that transition. And more importantly, I probably care about certain things when I'm looking at it. For example, when I'm looking at this, I care about the calendar that's over here, which I'll zoom out a little bit back to its original so you can see. So I care about the calendar over here, but I also want a second column that is ready for me to explore because most likely what I want to do is I want to be able to explore one of these episodes or at least see the ideas, for example. And so in this particular case, what I've done, if I think back to past Ben, so let's close everything out. If I'm opening up my Obsidian, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to plan out Build with Ben. So one of the things you can do is you can switch to workspaces. Oh, is it not do? I wonder if I had it actually disabled on this. Ah, it got disabled at some point. I must have been playing with a nightly build at some point. Okay, there we go. So for me, when I load a workspace, I was inspired to do the Command Shift L as a way to load because I'm basically loading a different context. So if I Command Shift L, you'll see, I have these things that I set up. So if I go ahead and go with Build with Ben, you'll notice here a couple things happen. One, it automatically opened me to the exact context I wanted to be in. Now, granted, there are some modifications to make because, as I mentioned before, I actually do having the calendar here because it kind of lets me know how to correspond this part right here with this side. But more importantly, I actually want to be able to see, I just realized I want to be able to also see my ideas in a kind of easy way. And while it's nice to see the episodes right here, like a way to explore, I'm thinking what would be nice is have my idea section basically present. And so what I think what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try right now, is I'm going to go ahead and split. Let's see, what am I going to do? I'm going to open this again. So I'm going to open Build with Ben series in a new tab. But this time I'm going to drag it over here. And so workspaces are also about panel management, I just realized. And so while we're working a lot with notes, a lot of times it's easy to think about a standard text document being this single column grid, but you can actually not only have split columns left, but you can also have them top down. And so in this particular case, what I think I want to be able to do is to actually just see some of the ideas that I have, and I'm just going to anchor it right here. I wonder if this will work. So by anchoring this here, ideally what I would have is I have the thing on the left, which I can see some of my past episodes, which is a much bigger table. And then I have some of these ideas that I've been playing with so that if at any time, as far as the workflow goes, I might be like, oh, a Wordle clone with view might be fun to do. So I can drag it up here and I can play around with it just like that. And so that way I can just go through and start thinking about it. But also I'm realizing this is taking up a bit of room. So I'm going to actually size this over here a bit, take that. And I think I'm going to leave it just like this. And so what's cool about this now is that because I have my decided layout of how I want to work, what we can do now is we can save and load layout basically. So what I'm doing, actually, let me make sure. So manage workspace layout. So I'm going to save this one. I'm going to save it back into the build with Ben. And so this is where call it the UX of workspaces is still a little bit clunky because you would think that there would just be like an update layout rather than save and load. So some of that terminology I will say is not as intuitive. But as far as like getting us from 0 to 1 at this point, it'll do the trick. So anyways, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. But what we'll notice here is, rats. So it didn't quite work the way I wanted to because the Build with Ben series here is clearly opening up in a way that's making it like, it's just basically reloading the entire note. But we have noticed some things that have been different, which is one, the panel here is open exactly to where I want it to be. And on the left-hand side here, this is good. We've sized the panel exactly to what we want it to be. Now, in order to actually achieve the thing I want in my particular case, I think the easiest thing really is for me to just create a note here that's called Build with Ben. See, whoa, what just happened there? Oh, I have two different things loading right now. Okay, hold up a sec. So let me do this real quick. Let me come down here. So Build with Ben, I'll call this ideas. There you go. I don't have that note yet, which is great. And there's a lot of reloading happening right now, which I'm a little confused by, but I'll open that up over here and delete all that. And then what I'm going to do though is I'm going to drop this entire section here that I have, and just like that. So then we can drop that here, and that should get that here. And now if I do Build with Ben ideas as its own note here, perfect. Then that's already connected here, which is good. And then boom. Okay, so save. Okay, so now I should be able to save this layout. So I'm going to go ahead and save workspace layout into Build with Ben, and voila. So now if I close everything out and I'm just doing my things, let's say we're working on Obsidian office hours today, and today we're talking about workspaces. So we talked about, for example, let me take some notes. So we talked about the fact that you can save panels in specific sizes and width. And I did not, sizes and width. Cannot save specific scroll points though within a note, which honestly probably makes sense because especially with things like scroll points, you can imagine that if you have the note on the left has more content, it probably arguably wouldn't be as useful. So if anything, if I were to think of an enhancement on that user experience, you probably want the ability to maybe anchor to a heading. That might make more sense. So that's something to consider. Anyhow, but from here, if I'm like, let's say we've wrapped up this session, I'm done. I want to go ahead. Okay, I want to brainstorm for Build with Ben. What's cool is now I can load it and go Build with Ben, and then voila, there we go. And so I have my ideas, I have everything here, and I have basically like I have my scratch pad, and whatever it is I care about already loaded and ready to go. And that is actually incredibly useful because basically what you've now done is created a way for your mind to shift context really within a few simple keystrokes. rather than having to individually open every single note and then resize it every single time, which, as we know, can be complex. So, as they say, when it comes to either forming new habits or especially if you want to improve on your workflow and efficiency of things, they say, for instance, if you want to be able to go to the gym, going to the gym, if you want to work out, can be a rather complex process because, after all, you need to make sure you have clean workout clothes, and you need to get them, you need to put them on, or you need to pack your gym bag, you need to figure out what your workout is. But if you could simplify those things, and so that's why they say things like dressing your gym clothes before you get to work in the morning, or dressing your gym clothes before you wake up in the morning, so you can just like basically get out the door as quickly as possible and have your gym bag packed already. In my mind, the easier it is for us to context switch, the easier it is for us to actually get into the things that actually matter. Because a lot of times you'd be surprised how these little obstacles that we have when it comes to, I'll call them like engagement points. The more engagement points you have, in fact, they've learned about this in user experience as well when it comes to designing applications for people, is that the more complicated something is, even only a couple steps in, it'll actually cause people to opt out of the experience. So you can, for the instance of like people who filled out surveys or forms, you've probably been in an instance where it was a simple 5-question form that you knew was going to be over with, a lot of people actually wouldn't probably have a problem answering that. But what happens is a lot of people create multiple stages of forms. And then when you do things like not tell people how long the form is, or you don't have the progress bar, all those things, a lot of people are like, ooh, this is too much. Even though mentally speaking, you're not really doing much besides answering a few questions, there's like kind of a question of engagement. Anyhow, that was a little bit of a tangent. But what I'm saying here is that workspaces, albeit while it being a feature that's not as popularly talked about, I think it's one of those things that can go a long way once you start figuring out what your workflow is for how you deal with things. And so once you learn how to switch between things, you'll start to basically optimize for that and move forward from there. So the other thing I wanted to call out, so now that we have that, what do I want to do? I want to switch back to the Obsidian. Okay, I want to switch back to Obsidian mode. So actually, now that I think about this, oh, I see View Gilmore here in the chat with a great comment here. Yeah, View Gilmore here. I guess I'll read the comment because this is something that won't appear in the recording. I didn't know about workspaces. Is it like having a checkpoint on your work to return to if you had to do something else in between with all the documents panel as before? That's actually another great way of thinking about it. I hadn't quite thought of it in that model, but I do think workspaces can be a way of thinking it like a checkpoint, or for those of us who do coding, it's like basically a snapshot, a git commit, basically. And so in the instance of, let's say in fact, that's a great example actually, because earlier, right? Let me go ahead and load build with Ben right now. I wanted to actually return back to the current Obsidian document that I was working with, but I wanted it within the specific setup. So let's actually practice that and see View Gilmore's concept implemented real time. So I have the Obsidian Workspace right here. So this is the document here. But more importantly, I have it zoomed in at 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that it's easier for everyone to read here on the screen. So it's specifically at this zoom. And so I'm just verifying right now that it looks correct on my screen. So yeah, boom, boom. Everything's hidden away. This is good so that everyone can see and read everything correctly. Although I need to get rid of that heading because now we have the file title up here. So I used to do the H1 with the file title as a way to see it. But now that they have that default on top. Anyways. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this. So I'm going to save this layout, and this layout is going to be called current Obsidian office hour. Oh, it did not save it. Oh, okay. See, this is one of the things that I was talking about. Save and load another layout. Once again, I just think it's odd terminology because it would just be update. That's really what you want to do. Oftentimes, I'm not trying to. I guess you could save and load. That would go back to the checkpoint thing that View Gilmore is mentioning here. But anyhow, manage space layouts. And here you go. I'm going to create a new one. So once again, I would expect a command that's called like create new layout. That's really what I would want. But anyhow, current Obsidian office hour. That's it. I'll just call it that. So I'll save that. Great. So that's been saved. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to load build with Ben again. Okay. So a couple of things. We can see that the panels and everything have adjusted, but the zoom is not part of that workspace save, which I guess it makes sense. It's more of a global attribute. It would be nice if it was part of the zoom, if zoom was part of the workspace, to be honest. But that's fine. So I can reset it, no big deal. But then if we would go back to Obsidian office hours, boom. And then I just provide 6. Then we're back to this checkpoint and we can keep working on it. So absolutely, actually, View Gilmore, I think that's a great way of thinking about the workspace, is an alternative way to be like, okay, I'm in the middle of taking all these notes. I have, let's say we have a canvas open on the right and we're like working through things rather than feeling like the infinite tab syndrome where you leave things open because you're afraid of closing it and forgetting where you are. Workspaces absolutely can be viewed as a checkpoint as well. So major props to View Gilmore for that other, I call it like analogy. No, I'll call it like a frame of reference when it comes to that. So I'm going to make sure View Gilmore gets credit here. This one I had a reference for you somewhere, but I'll figure that out later. So the context here is in regards to checkpoint. I think that's a great way of looking at it. And again, so with that though, as I'm thinking about this, because I actually would like to enable that better in my own workflow. So if I'm thinking of the hotkeys then for workspaces, let's see. Oh, interesting. I have a conflict already with this. What is this? Oh, it conflicts with the insert template log metadata. Oh, I know what that is. Okay, actually, maybe I'll change my command L. What's command L? Command L. Switch open local graph. Actually, that's fine. I actually don't open the local graph that much. So I don't mind. Sorry, I'm just resolving one of my key binding conflicts. Local graph is something I'm happy to actually have a dedicated command for. But loading a workspace, though, that is something I do fairly often. So command L will be load. Save and update another layout is one thing, but more importantly, what we actually need to do. Why did that not work? Workspace. That's weird. I don't understand why this filter is not filtering out correctly. Save and create. Okay, that's a little weird. All right, here we go. Workspaces. Workspaces. Interesting that they managed to autocomplete those things. Anyhow, looks like it's going to be manage workspaces. My immediate thought is like, so command W is not going to work because your workspace, that's usually to kill a tab. How do I want to do this? If I want to manage a layout, because that's basically what we're doing. We're saving a checkpoint. What if, okay, checkpoint is C. So maybe instead of command C, command shift C. Ooh, okay. That works. So command C is typically copy, and I try not to override finger or muscle memory for things that have many years of repetition. But command shift C on the other hand, I actually do a lot because it's basically like checkpoint added up there. The only thing though now is that if you have a layout that is already exists. So for example, if like at some point this first look at Obsidian office hours is going to become irrelevant because next week we'll have a new session and it'll be a different thing, especially if I'm working within it. So if that's the case and I did this means that it will, oh, can I do? No, I don't like that because even if I did this as one, I don't think this will work. Office hour, and let me save it. Oh, it did save. Okay. But the problem here is, I would say from a UX perspective, is the lack of integration. Because I would think that this part would be able to either create a new one or you could override it. So in other words, if I just want to be like to manage it, I want to go ahead and select this one. That's the one I want to update. And I would expect like an update button here. Then that would update the current layout rather than having to now, I have to save and load layout, which is a tricky one. So I think for now, actually, I'm not sure there really is a key command for that because at this point, I'll just be creating checkpoints, I think. Because again, let's say for whatever instance, we have another Obsidian office hours and the Obsidian office hours in this case, let's just make this like the 100th episode. Oh, that did not work. All right, OH100, create new is shift create. Okay, there we go. So if this is the workspace that I have, then theoretically, then Command Shift C, then if I click load, you'll see that it restores it, but that's not what I want at all. I wanted H100 to be here. Command Shift C. Yeah, I guess I would be like, I guess current Obsidian office hour and just save it like that. But then, and then I can load like this. So that does work. Check. And then I can always delete it when I'm done. So I guess that's not a terrible workout or like a workflow at the moment. I just think like off the top of my head, what I probably would want to do, like I would prefer something a little bit smoother than making it up on the fly. That said, the other thing about Obsidian Workspaces that I have a little bit of an issue, or I've ran into problems before, is that if you're trying to do something like, okay, so you notice here that I have this week as like a workspace. And I would open it, except I can't quite remember what I did in there. And so for the sake of in case of any like personal information revealing that I'm not supposed to. Because, anyways, basically what I was trying to do is create a workflow where my today note would always show up with a certain kind of grid view. And I think the reason why I fell out of touch as far as my use case of it is that I had to set it up every time, more or less. In other words, you can't make the workspace dynamic. This is, I would say, a downside of it in the sense that you can't be like, in this, for example, one of the things I ideally wanted at some point was, let's take the build with Ben, for example. So let's talk about dynamic fields. A dynamic node definition, which would be cool, is to be like, hey, if I had the latest build with Ben automatically open somewhere, so I could automatically see what the latest was. I had one point where that workflow could have been useful. However, because Workspaces is really about a snapshot of a specific set of notes, it's, as of this point, as far as I'm aware, is not able to programmatically set a note that it will dynamically fetch and know which one it is. And granted, to be very clear, programmatically speaking, this would be a little bit complicated because already, even within, like, assuming you even use Dataview queries to do things, it's still fairly complicated as far as like figuring out which one is the latest. And I can understand why that's probably not a top priority for the team. So to be clear, I don't think this is a big deal or anything. But I do wanted to make a note that like it really should be seen as like a static snapshot. And so now, however, that we've, I don't know, called it, make it easier for me to like manage. So if I'm like checkpoint, I really wish they weren't separate commands, because I'm thinking about it, like there's nothing stopping me that if I created a command to save and load, then every time I opened it, at least I'd have the columns roughly the same. But it's just, I don't know, call it the programmer in me. It just feels a little tedious that I have to do that every single time, to either look at my weekly note to compare to my daily note to then compare things. There are things I'd like to optimize. But anyhow, that's an exploration for another time. Okay, manage space layouts. I think that's fine for now. Save and load another layout, which is good for overriding. Yeah, I think those are the big pieces when it comes to workspaces that I want to cover. So the main thing I want to do right now is switch back over to the Obsidian office hours. So let me load that up. So current Obsidian office hour, boom. All right. So we talked about this, why it's useful, how you might be able to leverage it. And then the other thing I wanted to call out though is that there is, oh, actually, hang on a sec. Let me copy this. And then open that here. Okay, there we go. Okay. So a plugin that's worth looking into if you want to dive more into Workspaces is Workspaces Plus. And as you can see here, basically it's designed to enhance the UI of it as far as things that like showing you what workspace you're currently in, making it easier to switch for name. Oh, so it looks like this one improves on that experience as far as renaming or creating new ones. But once again, updating is one of those things that I think is fairly common. So just a thought. But yeah, so anyway, so this is a slight enhancement, and I just wanted to provide it there as a resource for those who might want to dive a little bit further into it. But anyhow, okay, so that covers our main topic for today as far as like Obsidian Workspaces. And so in call it the second half of Obsidian office hours, basically, please feel free to ask any questions you have about Obsidian in the meantime. But yes, please feel free to ask questions in the meantime. That said, don't worry, I'm not going to be sitting here doing nothing and just waiting for questions. That's one of those things where as it comes up, please feel free to dive in. But I wanted to use the second half of the session to just do some not live coding, but live exploration regarding different topics that are top of mind at the moment. And so for me, I'm back in the Dataview train as far as like really trying to better understand how to, I don't know, call it tips and tricks for ways I think people want to manipulate data with Dataview, but in a way that's not incredibly complicated. So anyways, that's what we'll be doing while we're hanging out for the next 30 minutes or so. Okay, so with that said, let's open up the Obsidian Dataview plugin. That node needs to sit out here. And then in the meantime, what I want to do is I want to actually rethink the dashboard, because we saw earlier I had a build with Ben dashboard for just doing ideas and that kind of stuff. And to be honest, I understand why I did what I did at the time, but I like to iterate on that concept with Obsidian office hours because I do think the way I had it was a bit lacking. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and actually practice what we did today, I'm actually going to go ahead and actually I'm just going to delete this. And then for now, I'm just going to the coup checkpoint. And there you go. I'm going to save that right now. And then we're going to go ahead and actually work on the dashboard. So what I'm going to do here is Obsidian Office Hours dashboard. And it looks like I already created one here. Okay, yeah. So this is a note. That's fine. Okay. Couple of things I'm thinking about with Dataview is one, there are a couple questions we need to answer. And so call it the programmer in me, but I'm always thinking about how to leverage all this stuff we're doing in Markdown in a way that actually is helpful for us in the long term. So questions that I generally have when it comes to, let's call this section questions. Questions that I need the dashboard to answer when I'm managing a series of content. One, I want to find out like what are all the call it episodes. And so I've done that particularly with a query for tables, but I might want to know, for example, what ideas do I have for the series? But then more importantly, what I might want to be able to do then also is what is the status of the episode? And then status ideas, and then more or less trying to aggregate the topics as well. What topics have I covered? Because one of the things that happens when we go through this when we go through the process of going through each session, a lot of the questions that come up basically cover different topics. And right now, I really don't have a good way for documenting or understanding where those touch points are, which is not a great thing. And so it makes me think that either I need to have some way of tracking those things so that I can be like, oh, in these sessions, I talked about Dataview. In these sessions, I talked about buttons. And so I'm trying to figure out a better way of creating those graph relationships in a way that like can be aggregated so that I could understand. Because there's nothing stopping us from tagging things and internally linking them. But anyways, just thinking aloud. Okay. So first thing first is let's do a simple query of all the Obsidian office hours, right? So we know that with Dataview, we can do like a list from basically I have a type content on here where the series is equal to basically Obsidian office hours series like this. Okay, so just like that alone, you can see that we have a bunch of stuff sitting out here, which is nice. But this is rather repetitive in the sense that like we have Obsidian office hours mentioned multiple times. And in my mind, I'm like, I just want to know the episode. And then I want to know the session name, actually more importantly. And so if we think of it that way, let's say, for instance, like, let's take the actual thing we're doing today, right? Workspaces. The data that I've exposed on this, exactly. It was funny that it's still saying, oh, wait, Obsidian Workspaces, office hours, this one. Yeah, okay, that old one I need to take a look at later. Okay, so let's see. We don't need to look at stream tasks. Okay, so we have the date that I've recorded it on, which is good because that tells me what I was looking for. And when it's published, which is fine, URL for where it goes. But it's a little bit problematic in that there's no way of talking about the topics, or at least there's no way to expose data about the topics. And more importantly, let's see, we could standardize the aliases, which actually is a fun trick that I'm actually excited to show when we're playing with this. Because here, we could say that theoretically, we have this topics right here that's being cut here. And we can look into how you can programmatically generate that. But in the meantime, what we could also do then is, okay, so we have the topic here. I'm trying to think. So in an ideal world, what I'd like to have is the episode number, because that tells me how many sessions we've done, more or less, and then it makes it easier to refer. I'd like to know the topic that's being presented, and then the recorded on, what date it was recorded on. Yes, and then the status, something along these lines. And so we know with Dataview, what we can do then is we can do a table. And then for now, I do know a couple of things regarding topic doesn't exist right now, but we can do date and we can do status, I believe. And so this does a little something for us. We can see some stuff right here, which is helpful. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse order this with sort by Oh, interesting. Wait a second. I don't actually have the ability to sort by episode number. I could technically sort by file title, but I feel like that's a little bit like cheating. Yeah, in fact, it would probably make the most sense to sort by date at this point. And so when you sort by date, so we sort here by date and then ascending. Is it ascending? No, descending. Do Okay, there we go. This is a little bit better. Okay, canvas. There we go. 24. Woo! I have conflicts. I need to figure out what happened here. There's something interesting that kind of happens actually with this is that right now, when we're looking at the date, we're actually, let's see, is this actually correct? 22? No, this is very wrong. Because if we're looking at it, look, I have 2021 here. Oh no, it actually might be okay. Did I really not do any Obsidian office hours in 2022? That's shocking to me. Anyways, this is why dates are useful. Ooh, I noticed. Oh, Slaw the CPA here with a question in the chat. So the UUID in this particular point is actually being generated in the front matter. Now, something I'm doing that's a little bit, it's different from a traditional UUID in that what I've done is only use the creation date down to the second as basically the UUID. And the reason for that is because I am not programmatically generating any of my notes because I think that's probably the only case where you would technically have the ability to have conflict. But I like the idea that basically there is, like, in some magical world where I could see all my data being mapped out like on a chronological timeline, theoretically all my notes should be able to be mapped to that. And so the UUID is mapped straight to that. But that said, if you care about UUIDs and that kind of thing, there is a Zettelkasten plugin that allows people to create like true hashes and that kind of stuff. So the CPA, hopefully that's helpful. But I like to keep my UUID a bit simpler for that, for the reasons of basically not overcomplicating it and having it actually mean something that I can use. Now, granted, I will say one of the counter criticisms is probably thinking like, don't you already have a created date to actually say the date that it was created? And to that, I would say yes. So it's one of those things where I do recognize that these two fields are a little bit redundant in that regard. But once again, I'm still kind of playing around with how I want to leverage those pieces going forward. So I may eventually do away with this for all I know, because maybe I will find that I am generating things programmatically for whatever reason. But at least for now, that is my current strategy. Okay. So here's the thing though. As we can see here, at the bare minimum, if you think about it, we actually, the date here, and in fact, this file title here is extremely long. And sometimes what you want to be able to do with Dataview is be able to hide the title. And so I discovered actually something that you can do is you do this without ID table. It actually removes that first column entirely, which is not, it was not intuitive to me that you could actually do that. I like the without keyword, but I just wouldn't have thought it would be called ID. I would have thought it would have been called like file, because that's what the first thing is called. But that said, what we can do now, which is interesting here, is that the thing about the dates here is that the dates luckily are okay chronologically, but I've seen bugs before where you actually want to be able to show the date. And so one of the things you can do, believe it or not, is you can actually, so let's say instead of, okay, so right now you'll notice that this date is linking out to the actual daily note date is what it's doing for me. But what I might want it to do instead is to link to the actual session. And so what you can do within Dataview is you can actually use this link helper method. And basically, I believe it's file.link. And then you basically, what you're saying is you want to link this thing to this attribute and what's the value in it. And oh dear, is it file.link? I thought it was file.link. Hold on. Obsidian Dataview link. File.link? I could just sworn it was that. Yep. Let me double check this real quick. File.link date. Oh wait, this is the, nope, that should be right. Hold up. Someone's using this keyword in this one. No, that's not what I wanted. Dataview table. Do from query. So this is one of those things where I wish, here we go, path display. Yep. Embed link path. Yes. Construct the link to the object. ToArgument is the display name for the link. So link to page name hello. File. Link to page name hello displays as goodbye. Okay, that makes sense. And I have the date field here, which was working. And so I want to link the file.path. Nope, that did not work. I have this some. Okay, hold up. Okay, so this is why notes are important. So here on the Dataview plugin, one of the things I've done here. Yes, okay, I did do a how-to. It is file.link. My memory did not serve me incorrectly, but for some reason it is having trouble with, I wonder why that is the case, that the link file.link is not working as expected here. Let's look at the error real quick. Every row, final data extraction, first 27, no implementation of link found in that argument. That's really weird. Okay, while I'm noodling on that, I did notice, this new solve the CPS question here. What's the point of having UUID? Do you use it anywhere else? So at this point, the reason why I have a UUID is primarily, honestly, because at some point in the future, my plan is to have basically a program that can scrounge all my markdown files and publish them to my blog or whatever. And the UUIDs are a great way of just separating them out as far as unique keys and that kind of stuff for the publishing. So that's basically why it's there. Otherwise, honestly, it's also a little bit of an artifact from when I was exploring more Zettelkasten ideologies as far as like uniquely linking things, but we have programs to do that. So honestly, in some regards, there's something to be said about keeping it clean just like this and having, maybe honestly just doing away with that meta field at this point. I would say for most people, honestly, the UD is probably not valuable at all. And being able to, however, I would say being able to access when it was created or last modified, although granted, this last modified date, yeah, there you go. This is now updated. The problem with the last modified date is that this is something that I'm manually creating because I don't trust the file system to do the right thing, because sometimes it updates for weird reasons. And so that's something this is still a pain point in my workflow, but alas, I still keep it here at the moment. Dates and aliases, probably the two things that are probably the most valuable, I think, from exposing that data immediately. The UD, as you're asking me, I'm starting to think it really is an artifact of an old way of thinking. So anyhow, I hope that was helpful. Hey, Dragon Dust in the chat. What? Yes, it's been a while. Okay, the only thing I'm a little bit bothered by is I've done this before. So where is this? I did this. Oh, okay. I did this in the weekly note template. Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, in my weekly note template, something I try to do is query all of it, but file.link, that looks quite similar to what I just did. Yup. Is that because the date is already a file? Date.text. Oh, interesting. File.link date.text. Nope. Date as date. Nope. Did not like that at all. That's a interesting phenomena. So to show you what I mean in contrast, the Obsidian canvas okay, here we go. We have this date here. Everything is linked though. Type content published on. This is bothering me. No implementation of link found for arguments link. Meaning that the file does not contain a link. That just sounds absurd. Okay, how can we test this? How can we test my theory without going to bonkers here? Okay, what we can do is let's take my sandbox note. Let's just do it. Sandbox note is here, and we're just going to we're going to call this type content. And then we're also going to say that it has a series attribute. And this series is going to be called test series. So if we for now, let's keep this very simple. So once again, we have a table with series from type content. And then from here, where series equals test series, right? There should be one note, sandbox note comes up. Great. So what I'd like to do then is let's call this, we have an episode. Oh no, not episode alias. Let's see. Let's do a VHS here. And which episode is this, right? If this episode is episode 1, then we could expose this as the first column. But for whatever reason, let's say we don't want the file note, just like I said before. So then we would say in this case, without ID, right? You can see it hides it. But what I want to do is link the episode to the file directly, because I think this is actually very common. But once again, I'm missing something because the file.link doesn't like this. I am messing something up. Even though my note here, in fact, not even my note, I literally have an implementation here that I'm looking at, because file alias is as date. Yep. Okay. File.link episode as episode. Mirrored that. No implementation of link, but that doesn't make any sense. So hold on, no implementation of link. We're going to do a quick Google of this. Dataview. Yep. Div function link. See, data aggregation. This is a whole thing I want to get more into with Dataview, because it would be nice to be able to aggregate that stuff. Nope. That wasn't it. This is weird. I've successfully done this before, and now I can't actually see. All right, Dataview, Obsidian, Dataview, table, file.link. There's got to be an explanation here. Yep. File.link as link. That doesn't work. Without ID, link file.link name as project. This is literally what it says right here. Yet, for some reason, right now, for whatever reason, there is a conflict that I cannot seem to understand in the code. So what is it? It cannot convert it to null string. What does that even mean? Because if I just do episode, it's fine without it, but it won't let me link to it at all. Oh, the woes of debugging. Okay, so there's that. Topics I've covered. How would I want to even begin to do that? But this is what's odd, is that it has the link so that if you have file without ID, yeah, it looks like it's just straight up not cooperating with me right now, because this works. This link clearly works. So, I literally successfully did this before. So template parsing error aborting. Template, okay, let's do this. Let's close all this out. And I want to see the error without ID is fine. Looks good. Then we link what? We want to link the file that's associated with each one with the particular episode. And so every row during final data extraction failed with an error first 3. Test, no implementation of link found for arguments link number. That's unfortunate. Okay, so this tip clearly I need to work through, but as just for the sake of proof, it's there in other people's examples. And once again, I have it. So let me actually just check something real quick. Okay. Here. Okay. Check this out. I have it right here in my daily notes, in that you can see it's going through and saying, hey, look, without the ID, link the file link. And then this is the other trick that probably people don't realize, is that you can actually access your file's properties, particularly, I think, front matter. I'm not sure about the inline data fields yet. That's what I'm playing around with. But you can basically link it. And so it like shows you the actual, like for me, I actually want to be able to read what date is for the daily note. Whereas if I do it without ID like this, you see that all my daily notes are in this sort of ISO format, which I don't love. Oh, that's interesting. It's logging everything out. See, this is what I don't understand. What is going on? Okay, anyways, but it's working here. Like file.link. In fact, you don't even need the without ID. I was curious if that was relevant to it, but it's totally not. So it has nothing to do with that. And then it was able to take the alias. So I really am confused by this. Wait, let me go back to the Obsidian dashboard because we're playing around with this real quick. Office hours dashboard. All right, what if I actually had, let's replicate this fully, and I had aliases. I said my test note. Okay, so by the way, in case to demonstrate what I'm talking about, my other alias, what you can do with the Dataview query is you can actually look at the aliases, which you can see right here. And so what's pretty interesting then is that you can actually be like, I only want the first alias. And so that's a little bit of JavaScript there where you access the array. But here's the thing though, is I'd like to ideally be able to link. Oh, interesting. Okay. Lesbian Revolution here maybe has figured out why it's breaking, which frustrating if that's really the case. Yeah, okay, that's it. That's interesting. Okay. So the solution that's being proposed is that because episode here is going to break, that's so interesting that this is happening. I would not have guessed that. Yeah, that works. Okay. So for whatever reason, episode is actually automatically being converted to a number rather than string. And so what's happening here, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But that does mean then that by that note, on that note, if we say series is Obsidian office hours series, right? So we have this. Okay, so there is no episode, which is totally fine. Can we just string the date? Oh, that's rough. Because the date property is here. It's linking it, but it's stringing the date. So this doesn't actually work at the moment because the date is actually... That's a fascinating outcome. Okay, so the complex or the conflict we're seeing here, to be clear, is that we're trying to override a file property. So in this particular case, done. If I open this up to the side, and we look at this dashboard, we have an issue here where there's a date, but the date itself is already linking to something else. And so even though again, to demonstrate this correctly, the date here has its own link already, but the file.link is breaking down. So I wonder if it's possible to then inspect the date itself. Okay, I know I'm running out of time here. Is there like a date.text? Nope, date.text is not like that. Because what you want to be able to do is to take an attribute, even though it's linked, and then replace it. I don't think that's unreasonable as a thing, or in fact, I think that's a scenario that could relate because I want the graph relationship between this note and that day, but in terms of querying data, I put it in that format so that I could do something with that. But clearly right now, when it's being output, we can see that it's actually doing it directly like this. And oh, interesting. Okay, so we're going to lesbian revolution here with the suggestion that not alas alias. Huh. Okay, did this actually work? Fascinating. Why is this like a hidden attribute then? Because it's hitting the first alias for this. Because we look here, I have one alias here, but that assumes that it actually has a property called alias, because if I switch this to aliases, I'm going to assume that breaks. Yeah, that does break. So it assumes a front matter property that is text first. So Lesbian Revolution, that was a great call to see if someone already, or maybe you already realized I already have this in my format. But either way, that was a great call in that you're able to call a specific text. Oh, wait, no. Instead of alias, what if it's file date.title? Well, not date.title, date.name. No. Dang. Okay. There's got to be a property in here that's not contingent on someone generating the alias. Because the thing about this that is worth mentioning here is that, how do I do this? I need to kill all the other tabs. Is that Command-Shift-K? Yes! Ha! Keyboard shortcuts. What I'm doing with my daily notes, which I find incredibly useful, is I have it automatically go through and generate basically using the moment library that's included, I think, within Templater. It automatically formats the ISO file name string into like actual human readable elements because as much as the programmatic element is great for programmatic things, when we're typing notes and referring to things, I like to know what day of the week it is and that kind of stuff. And so the aliases property here, super helpful in that regard. But I see Lesbian Revolution here with what seems to be another CLUD recommendation here. So it looks like within the date, then you actually have a subcategory, which is what I was trying to figure out at the time. Yep, exactly. Okay. Yep, just like that. So that takes care of that. And then theoretically, then that's where the alias could come in. Oh, it's interesting. Date.file.alias doesn't work, but date.alias works. Uh-huh. Yep. You can check the file properties if you have the inline queries toggled with this. Wow, this is so many amazing tips and tricks from Lesbian Revolution here. Okay, so the tip being mentioned here is regarding you can check the file properties field if you have the inline queries toggled on with this. Okay, hold up. I'm going to actually play around with this really quick. Inline queries. Yep, I do have inline JavaScript queries enabled. That's fine. So you're saying, oh, okay. Oh, whoa. Okay, that was crazy. File path link. Oh, I know what this is. This is literally an output of everything. Can I console log it instead? Because I would much rather that. Nope, cannot console log it. Okay, that said, okay, this is cool though. So clearly Dataview is going to require a bit more deep dive, but we can already see that we've resolved a couple of things. So actually one thing I want to practice while we're actually on the stream is if I'm on the Obsidian office hours. No, we were talking about Dataview plugin. And then within the plugin, I had this note regarding linking to different columns. Okay, so we learned a couple of things. Credit to Lesbian Revolution here, which I totally going to shout out when these tips come out. But the link requires a string. This requires methods for converting numbers. So we'll just basically say the string method and requires a text property or accessing the file name of a linked value. So in that case, it was like date.file.name in that particular case, or date.alias. Because actually, the quick explanation for this is the reason why I believe the date.alias works is because front matter properties are bumped up to the very top of the object. And so I apologize for those who haven't done as much programming. Honestly, one of the things that could be helpful, I think, for those who look to be power users of Obsidian is probably like a crash course in basic data structures for JavaScript, because really that's all this is, just understanding that there's a file, there are properties that you can refer to. That's really all it is, but maybe something to consider to help people better navigate this. But okay, so these are the big things that come out of this. And then, yep, that is amazing. Big shout out to Lesbian Revolution for helping out. Oh, whoa, I mistyped the screen name here. Amazing. Okay, so let's load up the current office hours. Boom. Back to that checkpoint. All right, so we've done, yeah, so this actually did happen. We did have time for that. Amazing. Okay. Done for that. Okay, cool. With that, let's move on to the wrap up. Okay, so for today's session, what we've done is we've covered Obsidian Workspaces, and we've talked about some of the useful ways to be thought of. The main two that have come up, the first of which is context switching. So when you're going from, say, like you're talking about coding and then you're switching to like maybe content production, there are different nodes that you probably want already open, or you might want certain panels to be designed a certain way. Workspaces are great for that. And then View Gilmore suggested another mental model, which is extremely useful for workspaces, which is really just a checkpoint for your work. Because as much as it would be an ideal for us to be able to write notes and then basically be done or like basically be finished with our train of thought, sometimes, let's face it, life happens and you need to step away. And rather than hoping to save everything in the right configuration so that you can be brought back to that mental headspace, workspaces can be a great way of thinking as, okay, this is where my headspace were, save it in this point. And then later when you're like, I want to resume that work, everything is laid out immediately the way you want it to be. And there's something about, I think, memory triggers in that when you're in the right, basically different stimuli, I think, whether it's in environments or honestly the way that your screen's laid out, can do something as far as resuming, like picking up where you left off. And so for that reason, I really do love View Gilmore's framing on that as a checkpoint so that you don't feel so antsy about, "Oh, what if I lose that train of thought and like kind of the flow of things." You're basically taking a snapshot of that flow and giving yourself that optimum chance to return right back into it. So pretty incredible. Then in the second half, we started playing around a bit more with Dataview, and I started trying to work with the sort of custom naming of columns. And although I meant to do more with data aggregation, ended up like encountering some interesting edge cases when it comes to displaying columns within Dataview that you want to link to the original file as you're doing that aggregate. And so a big shout out to Lesbian Revolution for helping out with showing some of the deeper, like providing hints and or honestly the solution as far as how to resolve different scenarios. So once again, if you are just sort of here for the recap, that's what happened earlier. I'll have bookmarks in the recording for you to check that out. So again, major props. Thank you so much for that. It's been an absolute delight to have your help on that because I was going to be like, I don't know, I was a bit at a loss. So clearly blog posts and stuff to come out of that, I think at some point, because these are the kind of things that I do think people are thinking of when they're trying to architect their data and aggregate them in a way that can be helpful for them and but most importantly, reduce clutter. And so the without ID tip is, I think, one of the things that really helps people as far as not feeling like their file names is constantly, they have to keep their file name there in order to basically link out to the file they want. Anyhow, that said, it's been a lot of fun hanging out with everyone today. Once again, Obsidian office hours are going to be on Wednesdays, basically at 11:30 Pacific. And so I'll try to get that updated on the calendar. And so once again, if you check out benkozen.io/schedule, I'm going to try to get that page up and running once again so that you can see either upcoming topics and that kind of thing. And more importantly, I would like to find a way to allow people to submit questions async so that, because again, I know that time zones are tricky and people have work in the middle of the day and those sort of stuff. So the more I can answer people's questions async and then basically let you know that it's been answered and collect those together, I think the better it'll be for all of us. Anyhow, with that said, thanks everyone for hanging out this week. It's been, it's been a lot of fun. And so View Gilmore, everyone here in the chat, thanks for hanging. I will talk to you all next week. And so hope you all have a wonderful week and talk to you then. Bye-bye.